You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live. My name is Nathan Foy, and this is another hour of coverage on Tropical Cyclone Amphan. I believe it is pronounced by now. I think we're getting to it. Daylight just about fading over this significant cyclone. It's large, I can give you that one for sure. It's intensifying, that's also true. Maybe not just quite as much as we thought it would be intensifying, which of course is a smidgen of good news for the coast of West Bengal and the Ganges River Delta region, which is where the storm is still expected to track. But it really doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, looking at the imagery here, with how broad this storm is, even if it isn't particularly strong in the end, which it still probably will be. It is large, it's got a high amount of rain production, and it could be a massive disaster for the whole South Asian region. Well, I'm joined by my team in this hour. We are here for just the hour to chat more about the latest on what we're seeing this morning. I'm joined by Luke, Elliot, Preston, Strat, and Craig for this hour of coverage, and we'll hear from their thoughts quite a lot. We've also got Tropical Storm Arthuer, which is at 40 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 1002 millibars, with now tropical storm warnings issued for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Hopefully, when I press this button, you'll see us all. Well, there we are. And there's actually a new cone on there as well, so I don't know if anyone wants to explain that cone. Yes. Oh, I should point out that we've just updated those numbers as well, Luke. We're now up to 85 miles per hour and a pressure of 970 millibars, so we've got gradual strengthening. Yeah, so I think what you'll see is that intensification curve may be starting right now, and maybe the intensity will flatten out a little bit sooner, because it would appear to me as though models shifting a little bit further west, it's going to have... Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that they couldn't hear you. Okay, they can hear Luke now. I was just talking to myself for 2 minutes. Don't worry about that, everyone. Luke was just talking to us about how the forecast intensity there... we've already gone with 85 miles per hour. The graphic still says 80 miles per hour there. Luke did that just before we did the update. How we still expect some significant strengthening, and that it's probably going to be beginning imminently, and then it might flatten out near the end. But what I was saying is that the track has moved a little bit towards the west, so that means that it may have less time to intensify. We're still working out with these we've got some new formats that are coming through on our streaming services. Generally a massive improvement. We're still working on it. We're getting used to it, as you've got to get used to anything. But let's go back to the Himawari imagery, and you can see there last light over the storm right now. If we take the water vapor overlay off, you'll be able to see what the visible looked like earlier. There it is, and that potential eye developing. Okay, so Who should we speak to first? Let's talk to Elliot. What are your thoughts on this storm today? And is it what you expected to see when you woke up this morning?
I expected to see it a little stronger, but I honestly think that it's still going to be a dangerous storm, as you pointed out earlier. Like, with a storm of this size, it has the potential to bring a pretty significant storm surge to the area. Even if it's not like a Category 5, it could still definitely pack a punch due just to simply how big it is, like Sandy, for example, in 2012.
Yeah, it's not all about the winds, and it's been repeated, it's been parroted many times by some of our members, but it's still true. 90% of hurricane fatalities are from flooding. And what's with this, and especially if it goes on and strikes the Ganges River Delta, which is our main concern, because that could be a humanitarian disaster, the likes of which we haven't seen for nearly 50 years. With the extremely low-lying land, some of those islands the size of Long Island in the United States, yet they have a maximum elevation of 2 meters. So all you need is a 6-foot storm surge to completely engulf that island. And this storm, even if it does remain weak, it's rather broad, and it will probably, even if it's only a Category 2 or 3, you're looking at maybe a 20-foot storm surge or more.
Yeah, and that would be truly devastating to the regions impacted by the storm, especially in the Bengal Delta region. And this is obviously a very severe storm, although it's not really intensifying as quickly as we thought it would. It still poses a major threat, and it's going to intensify further as it moves on approach to Bangladesh.
Yeah, not quite as quickly as we thought. It is intensifying, but not quite as quickly as we thought it would. But it could just be that the intensification phase is just beginning now, and then it will ramp up and exceed those expectations. Because all we're doing in a forecast, we average things out a lot. Quite often, storms strengthen much quicker than on a forecast, but because we don't know exactly when during the forecast the strengthening is going to happen, the slope is usually much more gradual when you produce a storm forecast. So that could be happening now. We'll have to wait and see over the next few hours.
I mean, just looking at like the huge outflow of this system when you're just looking in the North Indian Ocean, it doesn't matter if it's weak, as Nathan said before. Usually big storms produce a higher storm surge than smaller storms that are stronger with higher winds. And that's what we're probably going to see here. The deltas in general are just super prone to having storm surge go over them, because they're basically like 2 meters above sea level, even below that sometimes. And you don't need much to go above 2 meters of sea level, especially a storm surge. And that's what we could see here. We could see some life-threatening, catastrophic storm surge that could flood out some regions in Bangladesh or India.
If you're watching the automated stream earlier on, you were looking at this particular view quite a lot. Our dual panel. On the right hand side is Cyclone Amphan, and on the left hand side is Tropical Storm Arthur. Those images are just reloading right now, so in a moment you'll be able to see some animated loops in geocolor and in the infrared band on Arthur. Does anyone want to talk about Arthur right now? Because we're probably not going to talk much about it, so we may as well get it out of the way.
It's not particularly impressive looking by a large margin. I think that's the simplest thing to say. However, it could still definitely bring some inclement conditions to the Outer Banks of North Carolina in the next 36 to 48 hours, especially if it continues to move west of the initial forecast. If you're there, you shouldn't take this as an excuse to go outside today and go surfing necessarily, not just because of, any ongoing stay-at-home orders, but because, even with small tropical storms, riptides are still pretty dangerous and life-threatening. But in terms of direct impacts to land, unless this thing pulls off some immaculate feat, it won't be that big of a deal. They've dealt with stuff like this and much stronger before.
Feat. Yeah, no, I mean, at worst, the models were hinting that it could as it was going into its baroclinic phase, turning post-tropical long past the Outer Banks. It might become a brief hurricane just before turning post-tropical. That could happen, but it wouldn't be affecting land at that point.
I mean, I have recon up right now, and when last night it was like air pressure of 1006, I believe, and when recon just went in this morning, we saw a pressure of 1002, and I believe they are starting to make another pass through the northeastern quadrant and should get into the center of the storm and measure the pressure reading down in the next few minutes.
Oh, you're
Or at
showing
least
it on
in
the
this
screen
hour.
as well. Hold on, let's backtrack a little bit. Well, it was there a minute ago. Great, it's gone again. Damn it. Well, I could see it on Luke, but continue explaining it to us then.
So either way, a drop zone is probably gonna be put down in the next few minutes, and then we should see what pressure they're reading. Right now, extrapolated pressures are in 1008, so it's gonna get a bit gradual. And we are seeing that this is still a tropical storm, as what would you expect? It will probably weaken.
Here we are,
anytime soon.
we've got it on the screen now at last.
Okay, so you can see it's about to make its pass through the center. It's pretty close to doing so. And you can see here, this is where the SFMRs, and those are direct surface readings. And what we're seeing is 35 knots, which correlate to a weak tropical storm. We were seeing some 40 knot winds, but not as much as those 35 knots. So I think it's just going to start to maintain intensity until it can get some convection over the system again, because it is getting a bit sheared and the lows getting exposed right now by
Right.
this.
Already?
And it's important to note that a lot of these winds, the strongest winds are going to be the eastern quadrants, the northeast and southeast quadrants, and this might be a good sign for land. Like, we may not see as much gale force winds, but it's still important to watch out, as Strat
Oh
said
yes,
earlier.
it's quite clear that the largest wind field, the worst wind field, is well over on the eastern side. Yeah.
Yeah, by a good chunk. So the only way that even the Outer Banks will probably get more adverse tropical storm force conditions is if the storm moves significantly west of the forecast in the next 36 hours and makes a landfall potentially closer to southern North Carolina rather than on the Outer Banks itself, just because of how disorganized the storm is and how the wind field is displaced to the north and east pretty dramatically compared to what you're going to see on the southern side. That
Yeah.
recon image, they haven't gone to the southwest yet, but I'm sure it's pretty bare there. Even the northwest side of the storm has no tropical storm force winds at this time being, so it's pretty limited.
Wow, we just saw a lot of things there on Luke's screen. And now
There we
that
go.
is the cyclone, yes?
Yes, this is rapid scan imagery, IR right now.
Ooh, posh. So rapid scan of Amphan right now.
Yeah, we can start to see the southern side of the supposed where the center would be in the CDO. Has a lot of convection blooming right there, and it might be trying to form an eye wall. I'm not necessarily sure if it
No,
is or
it
not.
is. It is looking like that to me.
Oh, it
very
is.
much
On
so.
microwave
Yeah.
imagery, it verifies out what it's looking like there.
Okay.
It's not complete yet. You know, the south and east side are particularly prone, but the north and west eye wall, as of about an hour and a half ago, we're starting to look more defined. I think if you give it another 6 to 12 hours, barring a capitulation of some sort, that structure will be much more complete.
What's the latest image on that selection there, Luke?
Let me. Here.
1250Z. So that's about 20 minutes ago.
It's pretty good. I mean, usually it's 30 minutes behind.
Yeah, it's about the same as what we have on our displays. Here's the view that we've got from the Himawari satellite. You can see there daylight fading. It's just left the center of the storm now, so we've just had our last visible there, at least on this perspective. And and what we'll be left with after that is the infrared imagery. There are a few different kinds of infrared that we can look at, and these are tools that forecasters use to quite often help them determine what's going on within the storm. Satellite isn't perfect. There are better ways to measure cyclones, but when systems are out at sea and when there's no direct observations available, satellite does a pretty good job. It gives you a ballpark figure, and quite a lot of people get hung up on satellite estimates and how small deviations and in the storm tracking community. They really shouldn't, because there is always quite a significant margin for error, and several answers could be correct at any one time. What is the best way to measure cyclone intensities, though, is to be in one. Either ground observations, well, ground observations obviously the best thing if you've got correctly configured equipment. The next best thing is by vehicle, ship reports, or then aircraft reports, and it's still a disappointment to a lot of us that they stopped flying planes into Western Pacific typhoons back in 1987. We want them back, because we've seen in the Atlantic when they do it all the time, they do a great job. We probably wouldn't have had Arthur if not for that reconnaissance plane. But looking at Amphan right now, general movement still on towards the westerly, really. Northwest, something like that.
Yeah, I think in the past 12 hours, at least since more like 9, since the last video update I made, it's might have had some fluctuations east-west, but overall its longitude hasn't changed. It's moved due north.
Has
Yeah.
it?
And I think that's also reflected pretty well in the
Right.
microwave imagery I'm screen sharing right now. This is from the University.
Actually, it can be misleading. Hold on. Let me show you how this can be misleading. If you're like me there and you're just eyeballing it, thinking that, hey, last, how long's this loop? We're talking good 4 or 5 hours. It looked like it was moving northwest. Now you've zoomed in, it actually does look like it's moving north. But you can confirm that by getting the first image where the center of the system is quite clearly there, and the second image where the image is actually there. So actually, when you look at it that way, it's actually slightly east of north. That's interesting. And just also some rain rate images, which we'll look at in a moment. But first of all, Strat, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I was going to say, I just wanted to show the microwave imagery really quick of the storm. Because, we've been discussing the structure of it, and, rather than just getting the immediate scans, the University of Wisconsin has this nice tool that'll show you kind of an animation over the past several hours. This is usually Craig's territory. It's always him showing these graphics, Craig. Well, I really like this feature. It goes from about 0Z, so about 11 hours ago. It stops at about 7:45 a.m. Eastern time, so about an hour and a half ago. And you can see, particularly towards the end, the eye wall in the northwestern quadrant begins to strengthen more. The whole western half gets better defined overall, but there still is notable weaknesses on the eastern side of this eye wall. So before this storm can really get a lot stronger, it's going to need to close up those gaps more than anything else.
And let's hope it doesn't. Is there any way out for this right now, or is a catastrophe inevitable? We don't want to sound, ringing the doom bell. But this isn't a very good situation, and we have to be honest and blunt with everyone who's watching that this does have the potential to be an extremely disastrous system, depending on where it hits.
Well, I don't think we can comment quite exactly on the total endgame scale yet, but we can say that unless this storm were to just evaporate, considering the region it's hitting, with the potential intensity of the storm and the potential storm surge, that the odds of something going wrong are pretty high, unfortunately, especially when you compound that with the fact that not only is there extremely high population densities in the area where the storm can make landfall, but any efforts to evacuate people will be complicated by the ongoing global pandemic, and that how government's going to react to helping their people evacuate if necessary is definitely not going to be just as clear cut as it ever was prior.
Let's do a bit of nowcasting, but go ahead first.
You can go ahead.
Okay, just doing some nowcasting. Here you can see some of the rainfall amounts that are currently occurring. Well, you could just for a moment there before it disappeared. I just wanted to zoom out there so we can get a better look at what's going on all around the storm. So if you've not seen this graphic before, we use it quite a lot in the Indian Ocean when there's less satellite imagery, but it is quite an interesting tool around the world, really, because it's not fully accurate. It's satellite derived. So it's a satellite estimate of how much rain is falling inside each little section of the storm there. So if you're looking at the blues, that's less than 5 millimeters of rainfall per hour. So rain rate of 5 millimeters per hour in the blues. In the greens, that's 5 to about 12. Yellow, 12 to about 20. Orange then, 20 to 25. Then there's a very dark rose color, which goes up to 30. Then you've got the light rose color. You can see quite a lot of that near the center of the cyclone. That's 30 to 40 millimeters of rain per hour. And then you've got the red, 40 to 45. Then you've got purple, which is 45 to 56, 57. And then you've got black there, which is the highest, which is over 57 millimeters of rain per hour. And you can see quite a bit of that near the very center of the storm. On the southwestern side, which is where there's been a massive convective flare-up recently. Now, in layman's terms, what does that mean for land areas? Because obviously most of this is out at sea. You can see some bands influencing the weather in Sri Lanka, some significant rainfall occurring there in the south and southwest, and there's quite a lot there yesterday as well, so I'm not sure how they're faring, whether there might be some flooding concerns there. A tiny little spot on the Andaman Islands. But on the western side, and indeed, if you look further towards the north as well, you just see the tiny bits of blue. Those are the very outer leading edges of this cyclone at the very northern there, just producing some small amounts of rain drifting around central and northern parts of India, West Bengal into Bangladesh. But the main areas that will be getting hit right now, Chennai actually, just about to get hit by some significant rainfall there by the looks of things, could be on the order of 25 millimeters per hour. So that looks like a significant band that's just about to move in there to a very populous city in southeastern India. Elsewhere, there isn't any large areas that are about to get hit by anything in particular. There's a flare up there on the western side of India, which might be influenced by the storm but isn't actually part of it. Still a little while before the rain arrives in Visakhapatnam, but it will probably be in the next 6 to 12 hours, maybe less. We'll monitor that before they probably get their first significant rain there. So that's a quick look at the rainfall situation, which so far isn't particularly dangerous just yet.
The ATCF has updated apparently, and
Okay.
I'm not sure if Elliot wants to talk about it or not.
Go right ahead.
All right, so ATCF now has it at 75 knots, which is right with our estimates.
It's right with our estimates. We got it. What pressure?
975.
975. So they're a little. I think they're a little high on that pressure there, because I think people underestimate how low these pressures can get in the North Indian Ocean, especially with a system that's as large as this. And we're not necessarily talking large as in there's a massive hurricane wind field or there's a large gale force wind field, but there's an extremely large sub-gale force wind field. So you're talking, the strong breezes that are just short of gales, 35 mile an hour winds. And those encompass many hundreds of miles right now. I'm not sure how many because I've not looked for nearly 2 days, but it was around 620 nautical miles end to end. And I can only assume that it's got larger. So it's got a very wide air about it. and it's another way that we look at how large a storm is the radius of the outer closed isobar, the first closed isobar you see on a pressure chart. You've got all those contour lines showing where the pressures of the the general atmospheric pressure around the map, and obviously when you're looking at a storm like this, you've got a ton of circles that just go in on themselves because it's like a black hole kind of thing, and the first outer isobar that's closed is usually a very good definition, especially when you're looking at old charts, when you're doing historic stuff, because they used to be pretty good at that, at determining how large a storm is. And this one, the radius of this is about 400 nautical miles, which is fairly large. So again, the whole point of what I've just said is that larger storms tend to have lower pressures, along with the lower atmospheric environmental pressure that typically happens in this part of the world. Well, that shut everyone up. If you've got any comments or questions, you can send in a message to us live. We are here for the hour. This is Force 13 Live. I'm here in the studio ready to take any questions. It's going to be on that screen over there where the comments will light up. Start your message with Force 13. It will light up for us nicely there. We were inundated last night, or this morning local time, with a lot of those questions. Can't guarantee we'll get through everything. If we don't, you can always send us a message on social media by visiting us on our Facebook page or tagging us on Twitter at Force13. Every so often it shows up on our left-hand bar there. And of course, you can also join our Discord server. So we'll take some of those questions shortly. In fact, let's take one right now that's just come in from Nuria Martinez Boras. What's the chance of it becoming a super cyclonic storm?
I say it has a fair shot at it.
I think it has a high chance of doing that. It's about 140 mile per hour winds. Yeah, I think it's got a high chance of doing that.
Fortunately.
Oh, here come the questions.
Here come the questions.
Oh, gosh.
Is a disaster inevitable like Nargis of 2008? I think some kind of disaster is pretty much inevitable, I'm sorry to say. I don't think, at this point, I wouldn't say it would be anywhere near the scale of Nargis. But on a worst case scenario, it could. We don't yet know if a worst case scenario will happen, but there are worst case scenarios out there, but just like anything, worst case scenarios, they're very rare. Look at this pandemic. If we had a worst case scenario, you'd be looking at something like 1918 where a quarter of the world's population were wiped out. That's not happened. We didn't have a worst case scenario. Hopefully that's the case with this tropical cyclone. Let's see. What about the hot towers on both sides of the eye? Would anyone like to comment on those? Some big flare-ups, particularly on the southwestern side just now.
I just like to... They're not hot towers, they're like cold towers. But either way, so what we're
hot
seeing
towers
is that,
are usually much more localized than what's on there.
Yeah. So basically, what we're seeing is this convection train that organized itself around the center. Because on a recent microwave passes, we do see an eye wall, not complete eye wall as we saw, but an eye wall. So what the hot towers, what the convection is going to try to do is it's going to try to wrap itself around the center point, and then it will try to clear out the center point, and that's where the eye will be, and then it will try to intensify if it does complete the convection around the center.
Going off of that too, it looks like in the latest frames of the imagery, it's starting to kind of wrap around, but I think it's too early to say that it's conclusively really going to start to get going, as the convection is starting to wrap around, but still there's plenty of things that could happen to the storm. The dryer could continue to march in, or the convection just doesn't wrap around, and the eye really can't get.
What I will say is that by the time our next live commentary session starts after this one ends off, we'll have a much clearer picture of the situation.
Well, we would hope so, but we've said that many times in the past, and to come back 12 hours later and say, oh, we still don't know what's going on. But what is clear is that there is a major cyclone risk all the way from, definitely from Odisha in India through West Bengal to Bangladesh. What province is south of? I'm not quite familiar with Indian geography fully just yet, but the south of Odisha, is that Andhra Pradesh? Or is there one in between? I think that's Andhra Pradesh. They'll probably get some localized significant rain bands. You're just seeing one moving through there right now, so that could cause some flash flooding at the moment in the Chennai area and Nellore as well. Let's go back to our multi-view. Again, you can see both systems live. There are 2 tropical cyclones active around the world, named Cyclone Amphan on the eastern side, which I still don't know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly. I did get some good feedback earlier. So I think we're nearly there on that. And also, I'm trying to figure out what's going on there in the background. Let's just try and turn that button off. Okay, that looks better. And on the left hand side, you can see there another animated loop developing on Tropical Storm Arthur, which is a 40-mile-an-hour storm this morning with winds of 100, with a pressure of 1002 millibars, deepening slightly. And it will probably continue to deepen even if it doesn't gain much intensity as it continues to grow towards the northeast. It will probably grow in size, and of course environmental pressures get lower the further north you go, so you'll probably see little strengthening in wind terms but much more deepening in pressure, if that makes sense. Alright, we're here for questions. We've got tons of questions. When will our update on Arthur be? Well, considering at the moment we are running a 24/7 live stream on this right now, and because we are in a transition here with new graphics and new things that we're sorting out on live streams, it used to be the case that I could run a live stream and do storm updates at the same time, but I'm not risking it on this occasion, so I will not be able to do any storm updates on my own. Hopefully some of our team members will have updates later on today. Maybe Strat?
Possibly. I will say regardless, though, that Amphan is the larger priority in any
Certainly
video
is.
updates at the time. So you'll probably see one, if I make any today, on Amphan first, and then maybe a couple hours later you might see something on Arthur. Mostly because...
Well, we do have tropical storm warnings, so I think we're going to try and get updates out there twice a day on Arthur.
Yeah,
but the schedule's all over the place because we're in an absolute mess right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
With all this that's going on. So we're doing our best on the air, but rest assured, we're going to have regular live broadcasts. The automated streaming service will run. We don't know when we'll next be live. If nothing significant changes with either of these 2 storms, then we will be live again at 6:30 a.m. Indian time tomorrow morning. But if something does happen, then we'll be back earlier than that. So we'll let you know as soon as things change on social media and everywhere else. You know where to go by now. Do we think the Gulf Coast this year... Oh, it's just gone. I think it said, will it get bad conditions or something? Where did it go? A question about the Gulf Coast. I've lost it.
Oh dear.
That's frustrating. Are we near... Here it is. Do we think the Gulf Coast this year might have multiple bad impacts?
It's a, we can't really narrow out specific.
Sort of a pie in the sky question, really, isn't it? We don't really know.
I mean, we know if something does go in the Gulf, it will probably be.
And it also depends what you mean by bad impacts. I think there's a decent shot, let's say. Just put something on it here. A decent shot that we will get 2 hurricane landfalls in the Gulf this year. Probably weak ones, but I think we'll get 2 hurricane landfalls in the Gulf. That's what I'm going to say so far. But it's anyone's guess. Take your bets. Place your bets. I don't know. What's our prediction for Arthur? Well, we sort of just covered it there. It will grow in size. It will deepen. It might not strengthen very much. outside chance of it becoming a hurricane when it is on a baroclinic phase just before turning post-tropical. And someone actually asked what percentage chance of it becoming a hurricane. 2 days ago, I'd have said maybe 40% right at the end. Right now, those chances have gone down, probably 10%. More questions. I know the team's not getting to say very much right now. On the first update for Arthur, a model suggested landfall in Rhode Island. Any chances? I assume low. Luke did that update, so I'll let you answer that question.
Well, general rule of thumb, if it's a 2 days ago model, I would check the model now, which it doesn't show any tropical storm conditions in the northeast New England section. So I would say your chances are extremely low of tropical storm conditions. I mean, you could still get some rain from the system, but I don't think you're going to get tropical storm conditions from it.
And Strat, the New England area at large? That's another question there.
The New England area at large, very, very southern portion. So, New York's actually technically part of the Mid-Atlantic. You'd have to go to Rhode Island or Connecticut to really technically include New England. The model consensus overall has backed off from the storm getting driven into the Mid-Atlantic states by this kind of upper level, mid-level low that's going to come down from the middle United States the next 24 hours or so. And the favor now is like the initial NHC cone forecast, although near term further west, which is to push the storm out to sea with it. Some deviations like the HWRF still try to bring the storm near onshore as it gets absorbed by the low, and with a significantly larger wind field at that point too, to where parts of the northeast, so New York, Delaware, New Jersey, maybe even Connecticut at most, could get tropical storm force winds, but that is becoming increasingly unlikely at this point in time. I'd say the odds of that happening are about the same as the storm reaching hurricane intensity in the first place now.
Back to Amphan, and our lead hurricane analyst, Devon, has just sent in a message to me commenting that on satellite estimates, using, I assume this is, yes, the Dvorak technique, is currently placing this storm at 105 miles per hour.
That's really interesting.
Jump,
So if that holds, that would be. It looks like we might be heralding the intensification phase of this storm right now.
Yeah.
Be unfortunate if true at the moment.
Yeah.
So I was asking, how will Amphan affect West Bengal?
Heavily, at least. That's all I can tell you right now. Get ready for it.
Yeah, if you're in harm's way, it's still too early to pin out an exact landfall location. You could still technically make landfall in India. But
it could make landfall anywhere from Puri in Odisha all the way over to Chittagong.
Yeah, and regardless of that, though, even if we were to make landfall in Puri, because it's a larger system and will probably continue to increase in size, and we're in the northern hemisphere, it could make landfall in Puri, and extremely severe storm surge could still go way into Bangladesh.
And if I'm not mistaken, Strat, Puri, isn't that pretty much the same place Fanny made landfall last year?
Pretty close.
Very close.
But, if you're in the Delta region and it makes landfall there or in Balasore, you're still looking at, significant storm surge potential just because the system is so large.
All right, more questions here. And most of them are about Arthur. How much strengthening do you think Arthur will do? Dry air is destroying it right now, and it is looking terrible, they say. That's a bit harsh, I gotta say. A bit harsh. It's not looking that great. In fact, I wouldn't say it's so much dry air, maybe a little. But I think it's more. It's not fully. It's tropical enough to be tropical, but it's not fully tropical, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
Right. The sea surface temperatures. Go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think the only reason they really declared it fully tropical is because that wind field isn't like massive in one particular quadrant. It's still pretty well confined.
I also had a warm core. That must have helped. And I mean, like,
But
it's
it's
not.
barely, you know, it's not far from the subtropical threshold. It is tropical. We agree. I know we get famed for disagreeing with the National Hurricane Center 9 times out of 10. We don't, you know. We don't. We agree with its current estimate for Arthur, and the forecast probably too. But still blowing up a lot of that convection, and I think it will. Let's not forget as well, the more further it trends to the west, it's going to get those warmer waters of the Gulf Stream too, so it could do a little bit of intensifying at that point as well.
That's sad.
Right, and even so, the marginal sea surface temperatures mean that a lot of the strengthening is actually going to be sort of baroclinic in nature, in sort of the later part of its lifetime as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back to the question some people in the chat are asking, will Arthur become a hurricane? If it were, and that's a low odds at this point, much lower than 2 days ago, when it looks like this would form as a better organized system further to the east, it would probably happen right at, or potentially even just after, transitioning to extratropical and being absorbed by this larger low more than anything else.
Right.
If people are asking it's going to become a hurricane, very, very low odds. Like Nathan said, probably about 10%.
Now, yeah. Is there a possibility for activity to spur up in the Eastern Pacific soon? Well, you can almost set your watch by it. It should be on its way. We've already, of course, had that April depression, which has never happened before in 500 years of Eastern Pacific hurricane history. But we haven't yet had our first named storm, so we'll wait and see on that one. I would imagine it will pop up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. If not, something's wrong.
We'll say none of the long-term models show anything in the Eastern Pacific in the next 2 weeks at the moment. So maybe we are seeing that unusual thing happen.
It's not, you know, you can have a June start. You can have a late June start, I believe. I don't know what the latest start is in the Eastern Pacific. But I've got a feeling we could have something pretty big again, like we had in the early part of June. I'm thinking, you know, maybe something like a 1973 on the way for the East Pac. The first storm of that year was Ava, which was a monstrous Category 5 that happened in early June, stayed well out to sea. We'll see.
Someone's asking in the chat, what are the temperatures of those yellow cloud tops you see on the Amphan on the infrared, asking if it's lightning or if it's
Yeah, okay.
minus 90s, those yellow ones?
There's a lot of different color scales. I believe the color scale on the Arthur and the Amphan imagery are both the same. The pink is minus 82 degrees Celsius or lower. The black is around minus 70. The red is around minus 60. So yellow, I think, is in the minus 50s.
I think they're asking about the sparks of yellow that pop up within the pink.
Within the pink, that's minus 90, yes.
Yeah, that's not minus 100, that's minus 90. But those are still very cold cloud tops.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't usually see minus 90s that often. It's usually like minus 80. Well, minus 80.
Depends at where. Much more common in this basin.
Yeah. Someone's also asking, is it a coincidence, or are they referencing it? This year's Arthur potentially being an analog to 2014's Arthur.
No.
Historian.
If anything, it'd be Arthur's younger brother.
Arthur's younger brother. That is about right, you know. Although, yeah. No, you're about right there. Earlier in the season. Hey, you never know. If it was early July, just like last Arthur was, maybe it would have been exactly the same. Carbon copy. And I just want to point out a little bit of trivia there if you wanted it. You probably don't. But Hurricane Arthur in 2014 is the only hurricane to make landfall in the contiguous United States on Independence Day.
I just want to also clear this up really quick. Someone's asking, will a Category 4 or 5 hit the Gulf of Mexico this year? We don't know stuff like that right now, you know? that if we want to wish cast, we'll tell you that a Category 5 will, hit Miami on the 4th of
Oh,
July or
don't,
on Labor
please.
Day. But we
Okay.
don't know that, and it would be incredibly irresponsible of us to
Oh
to
my
say
God.
exactly a Category 4 or 5 will hit this specific point in the Gulf of Mexico at any point in this year, because we don't know. We might get a hint that something's amiss a week prior
Okay.
to formation of something when models start to pick up on a potentially dangerous situation, but we're not supposed to know months in advance.
As
Not
always,
AccuWeather.
we've got a ton of questions. We've got to hurry us along here. Keep them coming in. I can't guarantee we'll get through every single one, but use social media outlets, and there'll always be someone to respond to you there if we don't make it through here. When will the tropical weather bulletins start? That's a really good question, because we're in transition coming up to this, and these two storms and Vong Fong, that has really messed up everything. It's messed up our premiere schedule. We were waiting for the 2004 Atlantic hurricane season animation to come out. That should have been on Friday last. Obviously that hasn't happened because we're doing this. Hopefully it will come out this Friday. And the whole schedule on Force 13 is a right mess because of all this, but it's to be expected. We expect our schedule to get disrupted at least once a year, usually multiple times a year. We just got to deal with it. We'll let you know. Tropical weather bulletins, though, they will be here definitely by June the 1st. I'm hoping it will be quite a bit sooner, maybe next week. Let's move on to a few other things here. A lot of the same questions. There is one there actually. Oh, it's just slipped. Don't you just hate it when YouTube just throws you a curveball right there? Trying to find it again. Here we are. Will we change our Atlantic prediction from 14 named storms? I don't know yet, honestly. I don't know. We'll have the answer for you when we do our updated Northern Hemisphere forecast on May 31st, which is just before the Atlantic hurricane season. I just want to point out something in the Northern Hemisphere. The first indication of that April prediction being correct was a substantial tropical cyclone in the Bay of Bengal in April or May. Well, we've got one, I'm afraid. I take no pleasure in being correct in that prediction, but it has verified, and we'll see what happens next. Will Arthur get to Category 1? Probably not, as we said. CDPS stage. We've not heard from CDPS recently, but last we knew, Amphan was a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, and that is very high. You don't typically see
Yeah.
storms get up to stage 7.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good at all. And for the stragglers wondering about Arthur's CDPS, it's a 1.
So it's always going to
Yeah.
be a 1.
So, I think that tells you the magnitude of threat level for each storm. One is much more significant by the other by a very large margin.
Some more questions here. Why did all the models get Dorian's track wrong?
It was
Because
the center
you have.
relocation.
Good question.
Well,
No, I
Uh,
think they were talking about, you remember every single model had a
Yeah,
Florida
Arthur.
landfall, and then the next day every single model didn't have a Florida landfall. It's just ridiculous.
well,
Never seen that in my life.
They calculated like the high pressure
It usually is down to that. Model tracks are usually dependent on how they perceive a high pressure influence on a storm, or sometimes a low pressure influence on a storm. For instance, if there's two storms in close proximity, that can cause some real track problems on model forecasts as well.
I mean, we saw that with Fong Fong last week. The models totally underestimated the high pressure region to its
Oh yes,
north and east.
yes, yeah.
All the way through to the end too with Vong Fong, to be honest, because even after it was significantly inland for about a day, they expected it to make landfall at the north, straight northern tip of the Luzon region, and it ended up coming out not even fully all the way north yet. It came out on the western side of the province instead, and now it gave Taiwan some rain and probably some gusty winds when nobody was really expecting that still. So
We've
constant failure.
pretty much caught up with questions right now. So I just need to need a bit of help from you all, actually. With what also happened coincidentally with our switch around, we didn't anticipate this, but we had some audio issues here in the studio, and we've had to play about with some settings. So please let us know if any of our levels are too loud or quiet from either me or the team or any of the music that plays, and that would really help us figure out where the right areas are. We think we've got it right at the moment. Any chance of rain in the southeastern part of India due to Amphan? Let's bring us back to that imagery again on the rainfall, satellite estimated rainfall. So looking down towards Tamil Nadu there, Andhra Pradesh, you can see a few bands moving in. You just saw Chennai in the last hour. Got the northern part of the city got hit by a significant rain shower there. Elsewhere, there's a few little bands moving in. It's going to be hit and miss. Yeah, going to be hit and miss there.
It is possible, though, if bands extend far enough off and, if some end up detaching in any way, that you could see parts of southeastern India get some rainfall. Not necessarily, copious amounts, but, some rainfall nonetheless. And that's, because it's far enough away from land, that's not necessarily a bad thing if a particular area needs rainfall, at least for that region. But, if a really heavy band ends up coming on shore somehow, then, you're going to have a bit more of a concern about localized flooding.
Yep.
Certainly, and flash flooding, especially in these areas, because... I don't know. I'm not vastly familiar with India, obviously. I've never been. I don't have any connections with the country, well, apart from old colonial things. But with this storm, usually India is really struggling at this time of year, waiting for the monsoon. So I imagine for a lot of people, it's good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, although, I'm sure it probably isn't having as much of a direct impact on, seasonal activities because of the ongoing stay-at-home orders in the country.
Right.
Yeah.
And on infrared, you can sort of see that just the edge of some of the bands are coming ashore in mainland India, and that's giving them some rain right now, in fact.
Yep, that's certainly what we're looking at there. Okay, so some people a little bit confused as to whether the wind speed is 85 or 105. Right. We're currently running with 85 miles per hour, and what we're seeing, we will probably increase that pretty soon the way this storm's going. But what Devon, our lead analyst, told us, told me privately not so long ago via text, is that the Dvorak technique, which is another satellite method, which can have its pros and cons, it's not always fully accurate, is currently saying 105 miles per hour. You've got to think of this as a margin for error. You've got many different agencies and many different parameters and many different methods that are being used to determine the intensity of this storm, because we don't have direct observations. The JTWC, what are they going with? Are they still going with 85 miles per hour yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll go with whatever the ATC
So they're at 85 miles per hour. India, what are they going with? I'm not sure. They might be a little higher than that. Obviously you've got ADT, that's the Dvorak technique that I just spoke about, 105 miles an hour. Force 13 zone estimate is 85 miles per hour. We haven't used SATID yet, which is our own satellite technique. I imagine that would probably throw a little bit of a higher number, but at this moment in time, we're just looking at what we've got here. It does appear to be strengthening. That's the main point. It is moving north, and maybe a very slight eastward element on that movement, even though it might look deceiving from a distance, because I suppose it's because of the displacement of the cloud coverage. There's a lot more clouds on the west that have been fanned out towards the west, which might give you that false appearance that the storm itself is moving west, but the center there is moving north.
Yeah, and if we're looking for the largest at-risk population centers, you don't want to see this storm moving more east. You'd rather, particularly for the extremely low-lying Bengal Delta area, see the storm move further west. Obviously, that's not good for other land areas, of course, especially considering the whole area highly clustered with population centers.
Yeah, remarkable amounts of population in that
Really
area.
a situation,
I
but
think, the population of Bangladesh is what, 160 million?
yeah,
I
60
found the intensity that the India Meteorological Department
Oh
is
yes,
giving.
please.
120 to 130 kilometers per hour.
That's about
Sustained.
80 miles an hour.
75 to 80 miles an hour.
80 miles an hour sustained.
So those will probably get pushed
And what
up.
are they? And just tell us, because they are the officials in this area after all, and we've not even mentioned them. What are they forecasting, and what are they saying?
The peak they give is it sustains for around, I think, a day. I'm sorry if I think it's a day. Yeah, it sustains for a day as an extremely severe cyclonic storm with winds from 170 to 180 kilometers per hour.
It's 110 miles an hour.
So, but it's 3 men, right?
At this point, to be honest, if
And the peak, and that, what are they saying? That's the peak, are they?
I think it might be 3 men also. So.
Oh, of course. So yeah, maybe 115, 120 miles per hour. And I suppose that it's not. It's not. I think we're going to have to lay off the peak intensity forecast now. We were saying high-end Category 4, maybe even Category 5. At this point, we're probably not. I mean, it could still happen, and a surprise can happen at any time. But at the moment, it would look to me like we're probably going to look at low to mid Category 4 now. Would you agree?
Yeah, the shear and dry air intrusion last night, particularly about 12 hours ago, has fortunately likely limited the potential peak intensity of the storm.
Yeah, but that does not take away from the danger that it could produce with the storm surge and the rainfall that it does produce wherever it makes landfall. The Bangladesh Delta region is very low, 2 meters in peak elevation. So it just goes to show you that if you get significant storm surge, it can still do incredible damage, even if the winds don't peak at a Category 5 and are slightly less than we are previously forecasting.
The media in general is really hyper-focused on these, categories for cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes. But it is always very important to note, especially for a storm like this that is going to be impacting a delta region, that the largest cause of death from cyclones of any kind is flooding. About 90% of deaths from cyclones related to flooding, not wind. And when you're seeing a storm like this potentially making a severe landfall in extremely high population density areas with very low lying elevations, like Preston said, only 2 meters above sea level in some areas, while having a significant concern about any safe evacuations because of an ongoing pandemic, it's very dangerous regardless of any intensity that you may see. So make sure if you're watching this not to focus on the category of the storm, but especially if you're in harm's way, but rather instead what direct impacts could happen to your home location.
Right, and simply due to the size of this thing's going to produce a pretty significant storm surge that you would see from possibly a normal Category 5 cyclone, just due to how massive it is. So it's going to be really important over the coming days to focus on what impacts you're going to get, not the category, as Strat said.
Just a note there. Noah Harrington says there's been multiple reports of flooding and landslides in India and Sri Lanka.
Yeah, particularly for Sri Lanka, I wouldn't be surprised. The monsoonal area that the system has been associated with for the past 2 to 3 days at this point. Even though the main part of Amphan isn't impacting Sri Lanka very much, the overall monsoonal area that it spawned from certainly has been causing adverse conditions there for several days at this point. So that would not surprise me if that is accurate.
Alright, well that's it for now for our coverage here on Force 13 Live. The automated stream will return with you now with the latest imagery from both tropical cyclones. Apparently, according to the viewers, the outro music is playing twice. I've no idea how that has happened or how to change it, so that's something else we're going to have to look at when we're doing our testing after this storm has gone. We're still looking at it though, and we're still serious about this. Keep watching closely. We'll be back with more live coverage at the latest at 6:30 AM tomorrow morning in India, but it could be earlier if we see significant developments over to the night hours. And of course, if we see something happen with Tropical Storm Arthur. That's it from us at Force 13 HQ. We'll be back again in 11 hours' time, if all is well and good. See you then.